Hi there, I'm Lelia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of New Day, New Beginnings. Now, today I'm going to share a caption that I read a while back on Facebook, but it caught my eye, and I'm going to share it with you today. And then after I read you the caption, then I'm going to tie it to today's lesson. Now, this is how the caption reads. It says, people wait all day for 5 p.m. Well, we know what that means for the working people. They wait all week for Friday. They wait all summer for winter, all winter for summer, and some wait all of life for happiness. Which brings me to today's lesson title, which is, what are you waiting for? And how long will you wait? And is it worth it? Now, my story today is, yeah, it's a Western, but it's a Gunsmoke movie that I had seen. And it was about a poor man. He was a farmer, but he was a failed farmer. And I say that because there were so many years he worked, but his farm wasn't productive enough. And through the years, he had made so many promises to his wife, you know, all the things he was going to give her and all the things he was going to do and how successful he was going to be. All this was important to him. And he made all these promises to her, but it wasn't working out that way. And he spent years trying to be a flourishing farmer who would have a nice spread, you know how they were back in those days. But he just couldn't do enough. He was barely making ends meet, like some of us are today. But his wife, it was taking a bad effect on her because she had become very bitter because of all the promises he had made and not kept. And she became very bitter to him, and she started calling him a dreamer. You know, all you do is sit around and tell me about this, that, and the other, and look at this place and look at you. And she just became very critical of him. And she constantly was telling him what a failure he was. All these years you've been saying this and saying that, and look where you are. Look what you're doing. You haven't. She used to remind him daily. And she used to just come right out and tell him, you ain't never been nothing. You've always been a failure, and that's what you're always going to be. And this is what she drilled in him day in and day out. Now, although he was well known in the town, but he only went to town once a month for supplies. And even then, he had a hard time getting supplies because he didn't have that much crop to sell. But the people in the town, they liked him. He was a likable person. He just wasn't a prosperous person. And this was a man who always wanted, you know, to be approved of, acceptance in the town. He wanted respect from the other people. He wanted them to look up to him, actually. That's what he really wanted. He wanted respect from the townspeople, but not just from the townspeople, his own wife. But he couldn't get it, least of all from her. I mean, at least the townspeople were friendly to him. They recognized him for who he was and what he was. And they were satisfied with him. They would, hi, Caleb, how are you today? He just wasn't prosperous. But one day while he was home, he was thinking, and, you know, he was sitting talking to his dog. That was his constant companion. And his He just called him dog. Come on, dog, let's go here. Come on, dog. But this was the one place he could have a conversation without getting negative response. And I say that because one day he said to his wife, he said, look at me. I'm 40, but I look like I'm 60. But tomorrow I'm going to go to town and I'm going to see if I can get a job. And the minute he said that, guess what she says? She says, doing what? You don't know nothing. Criticism. That's all she was. Criticism. But he said, well, I can learn. But notice the sad part about that is, why wouldn't she say, oh, it's about time? Yeah, that's a good idea. Even if she said that in sarcasm, at least it would be an encouraging word. She had nothing encouraging to say, no matter what he said. No words of encouragement and no words of support. But that's okay. In Isaiah 41, it says, thou art my servant. I have chosen thee. Let's look at Isaiah 41:10. It says, fear not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. I will help thee. I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. I wonder back then, well, I think, did the farm people even, the farmers, did they even have time for church? It doesn't say they went to church. It just says he went to town once a month for supplies. Didn't say anything about going to church. I wonder if they had a Bible at home. I wonder if he even knew about Isaiah 41. But he was willing to go to town to learn. But so many times, even today, we have people that have the same problem. They let the words of others discourage them, dissuade them from doing what they should or could do. Whether it was their family or a friend or a stranger, there's so many things that even today people are discouraged from doing because of what others are saying. Like it says in the verse, it says, fear not. But just like him, he was fearful, but he was going to go. So many times we're fearful of what people might say, think, or do. We're always worried about rejection, unacceptance. Same thing he's looking for, acceptance. That's all he wants. People to look up to him and show him approval. And we look for that even today. And so many times, because of the fear, a fear of rejection or unacceptance, this keeps us from actually accomplishing what God may have called us to do. Think about yourself. Think about that. Now, let's get back to our story. So, anyway, early the next morning, he did get up and he went to town, but he did leave his dog at home. Now there were, he just kind of wandered around the town and watched the people and looked at what was going on. And I think he was just trying to decide, where should he begin? He wanted a job, but he didn't even know where to go or who to ask and what they might say. It's still all in the back of his mind. But one thing he did know he wanted to do, and he wanted to shake the hand of the marshal, because that was a man of stature. He looked up to him and he admired him for the work and the courage that he had, because he kept the town in order. Ran out the gunfighters and kept everybody calm. And he was just a great marshal. And he wanted to shake his hand. That was one thing he really knew he wanted to do when he got to town. But after he found out, he went over to the marshal's office and he found out that the marshal was out of town and he wouldn't come back until the next day. So he just kind of wandered over to the saloon and had a beer. Now, while he was there, he had ran into a girl that he saw on the street earlier. And he didn't know she worked there because she was just walking down the street. But since he recognized her, he just went over and said, well, won't you come have a seat at my table and sit down and just chat for a while? And they had a beer and he bought her a beer. And they were just sitting there having a friendly conversation. But, well, conversation, actually, he was telling her his life story, so to speak. So, but she was a good listener. And that's all he needed. This was approval to him. She even sat with him, took the time. This was important to him. So he was sitting there telling her his story, about, he had the farm and what he was trying. He'd been trying this for years and so forth and so on. But all of a sudden, they were rudely interrupted by this gunfighter. He just walked up to the table, and he had come to town a couple of days earlier because he too was looking for the marshal, but for an altogether different reason. So at any rate, he was looking for the marshal because the marshal had killed his brother previously because his brother was a thief. He was robbing the bank and he shot somebody, and now the marshal shot him. And now he's coming to looking for the marshal because he killed his brother who had already killed somebody else. So he was in the wrong. But anyway, he thought he was right. He was avenging his brother's death, so forth and so on. But he saw her sitting at the table with Caleb, the farmer. So even though he knew, he saw them sitting there together. So he had met her previously. And so she did have a beer with him the day before or whatever. But at any rate, he came over and, he just said to her, well, why don't you come sit with me and have a drink with me? And he saw Caleb there, but he didn't care because he was the tough gunman, and he figured, well, this is just some, what they call him, side buster. This is just some side buster. He don't wear a gun. I'm a gunfighter. I could outdraw him. He didn't feel any threat from Caleb. I'll put it that way. So he just ignored him. So until she said, well, maybe I'll have a drink with you later. Well, he didn't want that answer. So now he's getting angry because now she's turning him down for what? A side buster? Oh, no, that won't do. So that's when, so he started continuing to say, well, come on. But at any rate, that's when Caleb interrupted him and said, me and the lady are talking. Well, that did not sit well. Now he's angry. He's past annoyed. Now he's angry. So they're arguing at each other. And, Caleb stood up and they're arguing back and forth. But when Kitty saw this, she came over and she said, well, what's the problem here? What's going on? Why are you arguing? So she says to Lee, the gunfighter, she says, you were here last night and you were causing a disturbance then. So why don't you just do your drinking somewhere else? And that really embarrassed him in front of all the other guys in the saloon. So he just snatched up his bottle off the table, but he looked back at Caleb and he said, we'll pick this up later. And he storms out the saloon. Now, This took place in front of all the other men that were in the saloon, and the word spread quickly around the town. Now, how Caleb stood up to the gunfighter, and they in the bar, they was all patting him on the back and making him feel like a real hero. But guess what? That's all he wanted. He was in his world. Now they're looking up to him. Now he's somebody. Now they approve of him. This is what he was waiting for. Think about that. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for the accolades? Are you waiting for the applause? Are you waiting for the recognition? Are you waiting for the respect? What are you waiting for? He got all the praise he wanted. And even the next day, because by then the women of the town heard about it. Everybody's talking about how Caleb stood up to the gunfighter. Oh, he was just in his world. So they were praising him until the next day, the two met face to face on the street. Now, Lee saw him, walked over to him, and he confronted him right in the street. And he said, now we can finish what we started. And he says to him, he says, you made a fool of me in front of all those people last night. Now, what were you saying? And at this point, you could see Caleb's whole facial expression change. Because at this point, Caleb knew he couldn't beat him, and he didn't wear a gun, so he knew he couldn't have a gunfight. Now, this is when fear sets in. Not only with Caleb, but with us at times when we're stressed and don't see a way out. So now he's really fearful. So the guy is still waiting for his answer when he said, now, what were you saying? So at this time, Caleb says, well, I was only saying what I believe. And he said, which is what? Long pause, long silence. Caleb's whole facial expression is changing. Now you could see him going down. He said, I was wrong to say the things I said. I shouldn't have said what I said about you. Yeah, and well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I said what I said. Oh, you're sorry? Oh, okay. So let's forget it then. That's all the gunfighter wanted to hear. He wanted to embarrass Caleb again in front of the same people that he had embarrassed him in front of the night before. Now, Lee, the gunfighter, he's satisfied. He just said, oh, okay, well, let's just forget it then, since you're sorry. And he turned and walked away. But once Caleb had said this in front of the townspeople, they all turned and walked away as well. They all turned their back on him. They all turned and walked away, saying, oh, well, he was just pretending to be something that he wasn't, and he made us think he could do this, that, and the other. Just like a bolt of lightning. That's how fast, not even 24 hours had passed. And yet that same town that had praised him, that fast they turned their back on him. And once again, he felt like a failure. Now, this is just one example of why we cannot and should not depend on people for stability or unending support. Notice I said unending. because they were supporting him when he was big man on campus, so to speak. But we're all motivated by our emotions, and our emotions are moved by whatever circumstance is going on, whatever the situation is. We can't depend on anybody but God for our strength, our stability, and our support. People can't give you that. And just that fast, that's how fast they can change, as fast as a bolt of lightning. So as Caleb walked away, feeling totally discouraged and rejected again, he looked up, and who was running down the town street but his dog? He had found his way to town in search of his master. And what a reunion that was. Well, you know how the dog just licks your face, and he was hugging the dog and hugging the dog, and he says, "Oh, you found me, you found me." So, you know what? That night, they both had a good night's sleep, even though they were sleeping in the barn at the back of the blacksmith shop. Now, like it says in Hebrews, let me go to this Hebrews chapter 13 in verse 6. What does it say there? Let's go. I wanted to see that right fast. I had that marked for a reason because it says, uh, we already know God said, "I will never leave thee or forsake you," so that we may boldly say, "The Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me." That's what we need to do. We need to read this over and over again because fear is the main thing that drives people to do stuff that they wouldn't normally do. But back to the story. So the next day, the marshal did come back to town, and Caleb did. He went right to the marshal's office. Why? Because he wanted to shake his hand. And now he had his dog. He really felt better anyway. So he and dog, they walked over to the marshal's office, and Caleb got to shake the marshal's hand. And they walked down the street together. And as they were walking down the street, here comes you know who, Lee, the gunfighter. And he approached him and he said, "I've been waiting for you, Marshal. You killed my brother. Now I'm going to kill you." Even though he knew why his brother got killed, he knew he was a robber. He knew he had killed somebody at the bank, but that part didn't matter. All that mattered to him was the fact that he killed his brother, and now I'm going to kill you. So, of course, they both drew at the same time, but Caleb, when he saw them getting ready to draw, he says, "No, no." And he steps in front of the marshal. And he took the bullet that was meant for the marshal. Now, even though the marshal did kill Lee, the gunfighter, even though the marshal did kill the gunfighter, Caleb lay dying in the street. But as he did, all he said was, "We got him, didn't we, Marshal?" And he said, "We sure did." And the girl, Julie, she was there. Well, you know, the townspeople were in the street anyway. But she said to the marshal, she said, "He wasn't a failure at all. He was the bravest man in this town." The bravest man in the town. And his loyal companion, dog, laid his head on his chest until they came and took him away. So Caleb got what he wanted briefly in life. The one few hours when they praised him and patted him on his back, he got all the accolades he wanted. And for that, he waited a lifetime. But it was so brief. Just as fast as it came, it was taken away. They turned his back on him as fast as they praised him. So Caleb got what he wanted briefly in life, but then he got it forever in death. Because everyone saw how he saved the marshal's life. And once again, in an instant, he was the town hero. Only this time, he wasn't forgotten. Let's review our caption. What did our caption say? We wait for 5 p.m. Why? Because it's the end of the work day. That's for the people that work. So they can't wait till the end of the day. We wait for the Friday. Why? Because that's the end of the week. Work week is over. Break time. Time to have fun. Time to do whatever you feel like doing. Now we don't have to go to work. Well, we all have to wait for summer and we all have to wait for winter. That's an automatic given. We can't change that. But do we really have to wait a lifetime for happiness like Caleb did? And the answer to that is no. People praise is only temporary. But God praise, that's eternal. And whenever you need strength or encouragement, anything, guidance, what do we say? Read and reread. And Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with thee. That you should carry in your mind every day when things get stressful for you. That's something you should automatically know and feel when things get stressful, and be praising him when they're not. That's your time to be thankful. But that fear not is in hard times, because fear drives us to do so many things or not do so many things that we could have done. And that brings me to a poem I want to share with you today. I wrote this back in 2022, March. Oh, wow. And it's called Desire to Follow God. Lord, give me the strength to go forward. For your wisdom and knowledge, I pray. Teach me to walk in your footsteps and to be more like you every day. I know I'm far from perfect. I've so much more to achieve, but I'll never stop trying to do my best. In you, I will trust and believe. Just keep pushing me forward. Let my focus on you never stray. All I want is to be more like you, Lord, and come closer to you every day. So many mistakes I've made, so many wrong things I've done. And all the time you kept blessing me. Now I know you're the only one. I just want to thank you and give you all the praise. I know I couldn't have done it without you. Let me daily walk in your ways. So now you know there's only one way, and that's to follow God. And my closing words for today are: don't let the pursuit of tomorrow diminish the joy of today, because tomorrow is not promised. And until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.